Welcome to today's English story. This isn't only for listening practice. It's about hope, sacrifice, and the price we pay for dreams. Emily was 19 years old, living in a little coastal town, pressed between restless mountains and the endless sea. The town always smelled of salt and smoke, fish drying on lines, firewood burning in stoves. Streets were crowded with market stalls, baskets of fruit, and children chasing stray cats with bare feet. Emily walked through those streets quietly. While others laughed and haggled, she carried her thoughts like a secret weight. Her clothes were plain, patched at the elbows, and her shoes, her only pair, were cracked and thin at the soles. Whenever it rained, cold water seeped in, chilling her toes until she had to curl them tightly just to keep walking. At home, her family fought each day to survive. Her father, Mark, drove a taxi so old, it sounded like it coughed with every turn of the wheel. He left before dawn and returned after sunset, his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired. Her mother, Claire, worked at the window with a needle and thread, sewing clothes for neighbors under the glow of a flickering lamp. Her hands were rough and pricked with tiny cuts, yet she worked late into the night. They had no luxuries, sometimes not even enough food. And yet, in the middle of that hard life, Emily carried a dream bigger than the town itself. She wanted to become a nurse. Years earlier, her younger brother had fallen gravely ill. Emily never forgot the panic in her parents' faces or the helplessness in her own heart. At the hospital, it was the nurses who gave them hope. Their calm hands, their steady voices, their gentle strength. They stayed by his bedside when night grew long and shadows deepened. To Emily, they were more than workers. They were heroes. From that day, she whispered to herself, "One day, I will wear that uniform. One day, I will be the calm in someone else's storm." But dreams, she knew, were expensive, and her family could barely afford rice, let alone school fees, books, or uniforms. Many nights she lay awake, tracing the cracks in the ceiling, wondering how a girl with broken shoes could ever walk the long road to such a future. One evening, Emily sat outside her house on the stone steps. The sun had already dipped into the sea, leaving streaks of violet across the sky. The harbour echoed faintly with the clatter of boats, the smell of salt riding on the wind. Her father returned from another long day, his shirt stained with dust and sweat. He sat beside her, silent for a while, then asked in a voice worn thin by years of work, "What troubles you, Emily?" She hesitated. Then she spoke the truth. "I want to be a nurse. I want to help people the way they once helped us. But Father, how can I start when we have nothing? We don't have money for books, not even for shoes without holes." Her father was quiet for a long moment. He rubbed his palms together, staring at the road where shadows stretched like tired arms. Finally he spoke. His voice was soft, but steady. "Emily, dreams are not free, not the good ones. If you want something, you must fight for it. Start with what you have, even if it is small. Even the tallest tree begins as a seed." The words sank into her like stones dropped into water. They rippled through her heart, steady and unshakable. That night, Emily lay awake on her bed. The wind pushed against the thin walls. The sea hummed in the distance. But in her mind, only her father's words repeated. "Dreams are not free. Start with what you have." Her broken shoes rested beside her bed, worn and tired. She looked at them and whispered, "Then we'll start together." The morning air was damp, heavy with the smell of salt and fish. Lanterns swung gently from wooden posts, casting shaky circles of light across the harbour. Fishermen shouted greetings to one another, their voices rough from years of calling against the wind. Wooden baskets thumped onto the wet planks of the dock, spilling silver-scaled fish that caught the pale light of dawn. Emily stood at the edge of it all. Her new resolve felt strong inside her chest, but her shoes, cracked and tired, reminded her of the reality she faced. She had no money for books, no savings for classes, but she had her father, S words, echoing in her ears. Start with what you have. She watched carefully. Families bought fish for dinner, but many hesitated at the mess of cleaning them. The work was smelly, time-consuming, and few wanted to do it. That's when Emily saw her chance. She stepped forward to one of the older fishermen, his face lined like folded maps, his hands as tough as rope. "Sir," she said, steadying her voice, "may I clean your fish for a few coins?" He looked her over, at her thin dress, her tired shoes, her small hands. A short laugh escaped him. "You? With those hands? You'll quit before the first basket." Emily didn't argue. She only held out her hands, palms open. After a long pause, the man shrugged and pushed a basket toward her. "Go on then, but don't waste my time." The fish were cold, slippery, their scales clinging stubbornly. The smell wrapped itself around her, sharp and sour. Emily's fingers, soft from school and sewing, struggled to find a rhythm. She nicked her knuckles with the knife, winced, then kept going. Slowly, carefully, she learned the pattern. Cut, scrape, rinse, lay in a row. By midday her hands were raw, her back bent, her clothes damp. But when she finally laid the last fish neatly in place, the old fisherman looked at her work and nodded once. "Not bad. Come tomorrow." It wasn't praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. That evening, Emily dropped her first coins into a small glass jar by the window. The clink of metal against glass sounded like the beginning of something bigger. Her mother smiled softly, kissed Emily's forehead, and returned to her sewing. Her father said nothing, but his eyes gleamed with quiet pride. The next morning, she returned to the docks, and the next, and the next. Her hands grew tougher. The knife no longer slipped as easily. She learned to stand in a way that spared her back, to wipe her hands quickly, to work with rhythm. People began to notice the girl who never quit. Some mocked her still. "Look at her shoes, still falling apart." Emily glanced down at them, smiled faintly, and thought, "Yes, but they are still walking." Weeks passed, and the jar by the window grew heavier. One day she finally carried it to a shop, placed her coins on the counter, and bought her first reward. A pair of sturdy leather shoes. They were ordinary, nothing fancy. But to Emily, they felt like golden wings. She slid her feet inside, the leather firm and warm, and whispered, "One step closer." That night, under the dim glow of a candle, Emily opened a second-hand anatomy book she had bought with her remaining coins. The spine was cracked, the pages worn soft by other hands. The words inside were large and strange, but she whispered them carefully, syllable by syllable. Circulation, respiration, anatomai. The journey ahead was still long, still uncertain, but Emily had taken her first step, and for the first time, she believed that her broken shoes had carried her exactly where she needed to begin. For a while, things looked brighter. Emily's new shoes carried her firmly to the docks. Her hands grew skilled, and her jar of coins filled steadily. But one morning, she arrived to find something new. A polished stall with bright signs, workers in crisp uniforms, and rows of fish laid neatly on ice. Families drifted there, curious about the shine. Emily stood at her little crate, knife in hand, as her customers vanished one by one. By midday, her basket was still half full, and the coins in her pocket rattled lonely. That night, she sat at her table with her anatomy book open but unread. The words blurred. Her chest tightened. Maybe father was wrong. she whispered. "Maybe dreams are too expensive for someone like me." But the next dawn, she tied her shoes tighter, lifted her knife, and whispered to herself, "Not today. I will not give up today.